You know, it's weird, I have this tendency to move too much when I do videos, so I'm gonna try to cross them in this video, see if that goes better, just being completely static and non-moving. Which is funny actually, because we're gonna be talking about something with emotion and infused with humanity and spirituality and whatever goes into creating like cool instruments. In this case, this video is actually about our 8DO Studio Woodwinds, which is the third library in our studio series. We started with Studio Strings and then Studio Brass, and then we migrated to Studio Woodwinds. In the case of the Woodwinds, we actually got 5 instruments inside of the library here. So we have a bass clarinet, a flute, an oboe, and an English horn. And when you load the patch, all instruments are loaded together, and it's super neat because it allows you to quickly try out different colors. If you're a little more serious about orchestration, you often sometimes want to see, well, what happens if I combine a flute with an oboe or an English horn with a clarinet, whatever it is you want to do. Because everything is loaded at the same time, it's super easy to test out different colors, and you also got microphones, so you can get from very near perspective out to furthermore room-based perspective. These are studio instruments, so they're generally dry, which is sort of the purpose of the whole studio concept, I guess. But more important than that, we also have, it's going to sound overly fancy, but we have a symmetrical articulation system, or a symmetrical articulation matrix, if I was to be overly fancy. The idea is that when you play an instrument, let's say you have a flute, and you might have a patch that has like legato and then key switch to a staccato and a marcato. All those things are symmetrical for all the instruments. That means that every single articulation in the library is symmetrical for all instruments inside of the library. And that's neat, because we're not just talking about legato or staccato or staccatissimo or marcato or sustains or trills in different kind of ways. We also have 3 different types of arcs in the library. We have performance-based articulations that could be like da-da or da-da-da. Some of those things that have inherent legato in a singular note line. And we also have effects-based articulations, so runs up and down, both in octaves and fifths and different speeds and so forth. So it's both that you have the ability to figure out your instrument coloring by combining instruments, but it's also that you have this fancy articulation matrix that's completely symmetrical across the board. So no matter what you do, it always works with the other instruments inside of the library as well. And the same premise actually goes for both our studio brass and our studio strings as well. These are also completely symmetrical, so you can combine instruments and articulations in any way you want. And it actually follows either more than that. Libraries like our studio saxophones are also using that concept. But you know, more importantly than fancy specs and articulation matrix is the fact that we have a library that's just infused with emotion. One lesson we've learned over the years is that when you record libraries, if you don't get emotions in the sessions, it's very hard to make the samples emotional when they come back. I'm sure you've tried as well. You're sitting with your string patch or whatever, and you're playing something and it just doesn't sound or feel real because the players were not invested in the sessions. So with this library, which has been in production for almost 2 years, we took great care both in casting the right players, making sure that they were actually properly fed and got alcohol and whatever they needed through the session, so they were fully invested, because sampling can inherently be really difficult because you need to be emotional just playing single notes. So you can feel in the library, and I'll do my best to showcase the 5 different instruments in the library, from the bass clarinet to the oboe, all the individual ranges these instruments have, and a unique player behind them that really knows what they're doing. And it's just a joy to work with and listen to. And the same goes for both our brass and our string library as well. They follow the same concept. Great players, symmetrical articulations, and emotions infused into the depth and the DNA of the library. So important. And you can feel it when you're using it. You can feel that there are real humans in there trying to communicate something. So that's always what we've been talking about when we talk about deep sampling as well. It's not just a lot of samples and specs, but it's also really caring for the individual playing and making sure that they bring the best on a given day doing these gruesome sample sessions. But you know, more importantly than all these crazy sample ranges and articulations, this and that, is the fact that we got a DAW waiting with some beautiful mini demos, and I'd rather listen to the instruments than hear myself talk, and I'm sure you feel the same. Cheers. All right, we are inside the DAW and looking at intimate Studio Woodwinds. When you load the master patch, it's going to look exactly like this. You're going to be seeing all 5 instruments in the library, all preloaded. We got a flute, a clarinet, a bass clarinet, an oboe, and an English horn. But let's say that I only want to play with the flute, for example.
All you do is to click here, and this is in real time. This is actually how fast it works when you click and unclick instruments. And right now we're down to the flute. This combination here is what I'm talking about when it comes to designing your own instrument colors. So let's say that you want to do a unique, maybe clarinet and bass clarinet and English horn here. It's just a couple of clicks and you've already set it up. So it's super fast to test out the different orchestral colors, if you will. But let's isolate the flute here and go into the articulation set here. You can see right now I've preloaded both Legato, Staccatissimo, Staccatissimo 2. We figured out with Woodwinds there's sort of two different ways to do very short notes and some arcs as well. But let's say that I want to do some more articulations in my matrix here. Let's say I want to start expanding a little bit upon it. All you do is to click empty slot here and you got access to all the individual articulations. So you can see under traditional here we got staccato, staccatissimo, staccatissimo 2, marcato, so forth. Let's say that I want to load some trills, both whole trills and maybe some half trills as well. And why not add a couple of runs from our effects section here as well. And that's how quickly you can build your own articulation matrix. This is all in real time. This is all me just sitting in. You can probably hear the mouse actually click here in the background. But let's start here just by playing with the flute legato a little bit. It's super, super pretty. I think one of the hardest things with samples is actually to do soft and natural. If you look down here on this little part down here, you're going to see I got a couple of key switches down here. And if you look what's going on up here, let me just isolate the flute. You're going to see me playing legato fashion and then all of a sudden switch to this arc short here just to redefine the attack a little bit with a little more soft and brushy kind of breath. Let me just put that in context to the demo here. Just pay attention to how it switches from legato to that arc, just with that sort of more soft attack. And it's like the most agile flute in the world. And it's always super hard to find flute players that can really play with clean pitch in the higher registers. Try to check out this one here. It's almost like a penny whistle, if you will. Let me also show you some of the short notes here. And to give you an idea about how much we obsess about attack, check the difference here just between Staccatissimo and Staccatissimo 2. These are just different ways of approaching that initial sort of attack, even for the short notes. So even when you do fast runs, they can sort of have a different kind of texture. And also these beautiful arcs, these are the short ones. And the trills, of course. And that's more or less it for the traditional articulations in the libraries. So staccato, 2 variations of staccatissimo, marcato, different types of sustains, legato, and trills. And of course, the beautiful arcs that we just listened to. Let me just try the medium arcs here as well. It's so weird. The second you have arcs, I'm always compelled to start playing in polyphony and have 6 flutes going at the same time. As I mentioned earlier on, you can load any instrument you want because the articulation matrix is identical for all instruments. So right now you can see I loaded the arc medium here, and right now it's only playing for flute, but I'm gonna add a bass clarinet and let's say an English horn here as well, and hear what that sounds like. All right, let me just try the bass clarinet alone here. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, there's really a deep attention to the player, the emotion, the true DNA of music, if you will. Let me just try to isolate the English horn here and just listen to a couple of single notes. Again, just playing the arc medium here, but just to give you an idea about how much goes into every single sample, and there are tens and thousands of them here. But just you can hear it on the note, that individual little note. And that's actually a good segue into the next little mini demo I have here, featuring the Cor Anglais, or the English horn. This is one of my favorite instruments in the library. We really managed to get a player that gave everything she had, and it's just so clear in the recordings, in my opinion, and when you play it on the keyboard you can feel it. Let me play the demo here first, and then let's dissect it. But of course, let's also isolate it here and just see what it actually makes out for. Am I cheating using grand pianos and glockenspiels, or can I actually hold up on its own? All right, so that's decent. Let me try to move the beautiful reverb here as well, so we can just hear it in its complete dry condition. All right, let me just trigger it one more time here. I'm also using our H glockenspiel. This is one of my favorite libraries of all time, like easily my top 5 for ADO products, and we have over 300 instruments. These are called acoustic grand ensembles, so we recorded all these ensembles of glockenspiels and marimbas and guitars and pianos and harps and many other things. It's just a beautiful library. And then over here we got the new 1928 piano, which is my own piano. I have it in my living room. It's an old Steinway from 1928 with original strings on it. And when we did the new version here, we focused a lot more on trying to get the best and most beautiful aspects out of it. And in this particular case here, I'm using just a soft piano, which really, really has a gentle, more lyrical nature to it. And it's a little bit funny with virtual instruments sometimes, because it's kind of like, you know, the scene in Matrix where like, I know Kung Fu. Well, I know English horn now as well, even though I really don't play it in reality. But you can play super nimble on the keyboard. Let me just play some fast runs here. Now, in this particular case, actually, if you notice here, you can see that I down-tuned 2 semitones. It's actually because I like it slightly darker. That's just my own preference, and it's one of the things I encourage you to do when you work with virtual orchestration. You don't always have to go by de facto. Sometimes it's cool to play a little bit around with the tuning as well. And of course, you can also do that with the microphone positions here, or by combining different instruments together to create all these different types of colors. Let me also try to play the English horn, but without any pitch adjustments this time. So you can see the tuning is now at 0. Let's check out what that sounds like. And don't you just love this xylophone ensemble behind? I think it's super cool. This is also from our acoustic grand ensembles. In this case, we played the xylophone ensemble with soft melodies, so that's sort of very gentle texture. Just ties well with more gentle instruments like the glockenspiels here as well. Let me just show both of them actually. And if you ever want to understand the poetic beauty of glockenspiels, it's also in our H collection here. This is the only glockenspiel sample I ever use and come back to because it's just perfect. This is what happens when you got 9 glockenspiels playing together at the same time in a big, beautiful orchestral hall called Slin, where Two Steps and us and many others have recorded. And it's just super nimble. If you look here closely at this particular phrase I played here, it's very fast and delicate, and a lot of almost ornamentations going on, and it just pulls it off. Then let me try to do the same thing here on the oboe. One instrument we've gotten a lot of requests for is the bass clarinet. And it's actually a really difficult instrument to capture because its range is so big. You can really go from the lowest of low up to reasonably high notes actually. It's super versatile. And again, one of those things like, I know Kung Fu, I know my bass clarinet all of a sudden. Check it out. Like the bass clarinet has such an expansive range and unique colors. It's just a gorgeous instrument. Like, let me just try a D minor here, going all the way up in scale. And you're probably noticing it sounds a little bit soft. If you pay attention here to the dynamics knob here, this is my mod wheel that I'm moving in real time, and you can sculpt through the dynamics. I have this running joke with Cor Anglais that I like to play him random modern concertos, and I'm happy to present you with my Opus 687th Modern Symphony Bass Clarinet Solo Improvisation. I'll just fade it out right there. You get what I mean, right? You can do anything you want. You play it essentially like any other instrument, and you'll quickly build a knack for the different instruments in here. For example, with the bass clarinet, it's actually a fun instrument to try on some of our more performance-based articulations here. So let's try mezzo tremolos first. Isn't it amazing how machine-like that actually sounds? Let me also show you the tuplets, the triplets, and the dada. So let's just build them really quickly here in articulation matrix. And that's it. We've now built a performance-based articulation matrix. And I love these sort of smaller ornamental type of articulations. Let me try to load that on the flute as well here. So we got bass clarinet and flute playing the da-da-da-da-da triplets. And we also got these gorgeous dada articulations, sort of very big band swingy. And let me just turn the reverb on as well so you can get a more natural impression. And it's super cool with these things because when we do performance-based articulations, we actually do them in round robin or repetition order. So that's why I can play the same chords and it still sounds cool and alive because I'm not essentially triggering the same samples. Every time you play the same chord, it generates a new set of samples. So you get a much more natural variation. It's important for these sort of more ornamental performance-based articulations because you need that natural variation. They play fast and are interconnected notes. Let me also demonstrate the microphones, particularly now that we are without reverb in the demo here. Let me just play the super close one here. If you look closely down here on this parameter here, you can see that you can slide between two sets of microphone positions very close and further out in the room in the studio. And they have very, very different colors to them. And it's just an additional tool in the box of colors and instrumentation. And I think it's so neat that you can immediately change the colors both with the microphones. You can change the colors by combining different types of instruments together. And even though we probably have the most insane articulation matrix built inside of a single VST, it's all symmetrical no matter what instruments you combine. Let's also check out the more common clarinet here. Clarinet is just one other example of the nimbleness and ease of using the instruments in the library. It's just such a joy and nimble to play. And the same goes for our beautiful oboe here as well. Let me just turn the reverb on this one as well. And let's also listen to the different microphones. The oboe is actually a really good instrument just to check that out on, because it's so bright and clear. And in this case, I'm using the closed microphone on the oboe. And let me dial to the other side of the room. So this would be more of a room-based microphone position. The first one here is very near field, and this one is a little more roomy. But these are Studio Woodwinds, just like we have Studio Strings and Studio Brass. These are in a dry location, so even the room here is noticeably drier than a scoring stage or a hall. And as I've mentioned a couple of times, this is all about coloring. So let me try to play it again with the reverb on here. First with a room and then dial down to the closed near field here. Even in a more hall-based setting, you can really dial in the sound. So you get noticeably more distance by using the room microphone, and you really get that beautiful up-close sound. I prefer to keep the microphones mostly in their dry state here. I think it helps cut through the mix a little bit better. You get a little more of that classical hall sound when you go into the room here, but this upfront sound is just so clear. And you might be wondering, what happens if I load all 5 instruments and play legato with them? Let me just paint it out a little bit here to get a little more of a sort of natural spread for the different instruments here. Let's make sure the bass is somewhat in the middle. And as you're probably noticing, we can keep on talking about this library in infinity. Let's just take a quick recap here before we wrap it up. We got 5 instruments: the flute, the clarinet, the bass clarinet, the oboe, and the Cor Anglais, or the English horn. All articulations are completely symmetrical. You can double click here and build any matrix you want as fast as you're seeing me doing it right now. We have a wealth of different articulations, both here in the traditional section with staccato and staccatissimo, staccato, sustains, all the usual stuff, legatos, layered. We have 3 different types of arcs, recorded at different speeds and different dynamics. We have 4 performance-based articulations, including measured tremolos that actually measure to your DAW host tempo. And then we have a massive section here of effects. And if that wasn't enough, you can also dial between different microphone positions. You can create your own instrument colors by combining different instruments. You just play it like you play a piano. All the instruments are beautifully layered together, and it's super easy to control the volume and the pan and all that for it. This is not the last in our studio collection. So far we have studio saxophone, studio brass, studio strings, and studio woodwinds, but we got more coming soon as well. So anyway, thanks so much for watching, and hope to see you in the next video.